Everybody, Scott Dillon here from the SCP Cloud Platform team, and we are back in the garage with, for me, a surprisingly high number of people given it's July and vacation time. So I'm pretty excited to be here. Today's topic, for those of you that have not been on a previous session, we started back in November building out an end-to-end scenario that we've also now taken and put into a virtual academy format, but it's all about building an application and trying to string together some of the SAP Cloud Platform services to see how they can complement and make your life easier when it comes time to build an application. So today's topic is process visibility, and I put a post out there for those of you that don't follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Feel free to do so. But I put a post out there and I said, you know, in complete transparency, I hadn't really used the process visibility service until about 2 weeks ago when I started working on this with my co-host, and I'm really disappointed that I didn't work with it earlier, because I have been quite impressed with what I've seen, and I think you will be quite impressed today as well. So everybody knows, or the people that have been on the phone in the past, you will know that the format that we have, we try to keep is a limited number or a limited amount of PowerPoint. We don't want to PowerPoint you to death, so we're going to do a little bit of PowerPoint like we always do, just to kind of set the stage. Then we're going to get in, we're going to show you real software, where to find it, how to set it up, and stuff like that. But the format that we always do is I'm here typically every month, and I try to bring a guest. So my guest today is a friend, colleague that I've known for a long time, super great guy, Peter McNulty. Peter, what do you do for SAP?
Well, first of all, thank you, Scott, and everyone on the phone and the staff for organizing this. Yeah, I'm in the product management organization for digital process automation. And this is part of the extension suite. So I focus on workflow, business rules, process visibility, which is the subject today. And we also have some new enhancements. We're putting this under the banner of workflow management, which gets into things like process flexibility and process variance. But that'll be a topic for hopefully a future garage session. So I've been with SAP over 20 years. I'm an SAP Mentor alumni and also pretty active in the ASUG community, so the BIDI organization. And yeah, like you, just love technology. And yeah, so this is what I'm here for.
Awesome, awesome. So Peter just knows a little bit about everything. So just super smart guy all around. I'm very fortunate to have him with me here today. And he's taught me a ton about process visibility over the last couple of weeks. But I'll just say this quick joke before we start. So Peter asked me yesterday, you know, how have the garage sessions been going? Have you had any problems? I said, in fact, only the one that you did with me about a year ago. So I'm looking outside my window. And for those of you that watched the workflow session a year ago, not the one we just did 2 months ago, but a year ago back, a tornado passed over my house, and that was with Peter. So today we're hoping to wipe the slate clean and not have to worry about that and shut down and join back via my cell phone. So anyway, just to kind of give some insight into what's the rest of the year holds. And so this is our plan. There's only one thing that might change on this list, and that's the very last session. But next month, we're going to do intelligent RPA. So what we're hoping to do and show is that you will see the workflow that's been built out prior to today for the approvals of incidents. So you're going to see that a little bit today. But what we want to do is we want to layer RPA on top of that to kind of automate the normal, and then people can deal with the exceptions, which is the idea. And then in September, we're going to do Analytics Cloud. And in October, Peter has volunteered to come back with me in October and show people and peel back the onion on the business rules that we created for today. So we're not going to give you the insight on the business rules today. We're just going to mention it, but know that you can come back in October and get the full scoop. And then one of two things will happen in November. Either A, I'll go down this path and we're going to review everything that we've done since last November to that November and show how it was all brought together as one big app. Or we might do a work zone if it's ready for prime time. So we'll keep that. We'll decide on that as we get closer. So everybody knows I kind of always do a little poll. We're going to take 30 seconds. So get in there, be a little bit interactive. Let us know if this is your first time or not. It's a very simple question. It's pretty binary. Is your first time in the garage, yes or no? And we'll just bump buy some time here for 30 seconds before I jump to the next slide, because I like to know if people are coming back, if they like what they hear, if you're not liking the format, or if you have suggestions on how we can improve or other topics that we should do. I'm in the middle of considering topics for 2021. I can't believe that, but already. That would be amazing. The other thing I'm going to mention, just as I go to this next poll. Okay, so we got a 50-50 split. This is really great to have some new people on here, so welcome to the new people. Hopefully you're going to enjoy your stay with us today. And now I want to get an idea if you've ever touched or used the two services that we're going to talk about. So just a quick, let me know if you've used the workflow service, because that'll give us just a little bit of insight when we go to explain it and talk about it, just how much detail we should or should not give. That would be amazing. That'd be great. And then the other thing we don't have today, just which we normally do, is we don't have anybody manning the Q&A booth. So just trust me when I say, if you put a bunch of questions in there, please put them in the Q&A pod, and then Peter and I will answer those questions, and they'll be sent out in an email. Okay, so let's go to the next screen. We've got, have you ever used a workflow service? Yes. And okay, so Peter, we've got like a 90-10 split. People, 10% of the people have touched the workflow service, 90% have not. So that gives us a little bit of insight. So I'm guessing the question to this poll will be very similar. Have you ever used the process visibility service? So like me, 2 weeks ago, I had never used it, but I can almost guarantee you, after you see how easy the service is to use, you're going to want to use it after today, I would contend strongly. So let's see. I need people to get in there and give us a few answers. I'm going to wait 30 more seconds. I've seen 19 of 60 have submitted. Okay, we're just about halfway, which is great. Okay, so same idea, Peter. No one, like me, a lot of people probably haven't heard of, seen of, so this is a perfect opportunity to tell people what this is all about. So this is the agenda. We're going to do a 2-minute overview of the end-to-end scenario. We're right on time here. We're going to do, Peter's going to then jump into a few slides, not many. I think we have 4. So we kind of cap it out of 4 or 5 slides because people aren't here to see PowerPoints. We know that. And then he's going to jump into the process visibility launchpad, introduce people to that, do a quick overview, tell you what's what, where's everything that you need to know about that. And then after he walks through that, I'm going to build one and show you how we can do that in like 20, 25 minutes and put together a really nice looking dashboard based on the end-to-end scenario. So let me just share, actually, I think I have it here on the slide. So for those of you that joined back in November, January, February, or if you attended the virtual academy that we did, you participated in a scenario where we built a safety incident near miss type application. Now, it wasn't complicated, but the idea was to illustrate the end-to-end. And so what's going to be changing is at the current situation, we had a mobile device with UI5, we had a mobile development kit app, and it was creating records using the CAP framework and storing them in HANA. And then what would happen after that, we would publish an event. And this is super important because SAP is slowly but surely, I would say, righting the ship to start adopting an event-driven architecture across SAP. So you'll start to see now when you go to the api.sap.com, we're starting to publish events out of our LOB apps. And this is very exciting for me because it's an area that I'm hugely interested in, because I believe it's the way that you can truly build an asynchronous, loosely coupled architecture. So then what you see down at the bottom, which is now where we're going to play today, one of the things that we do right off the bat, when a new incident is created, we basically start a workflow. So for every incident that gets created, we start one workflow so that someone can take a look at it and approve it. Now, what we've done since this workshop and since we haven't really covered this is now we've added some rules. And we've added some rules for 2 things. One, if you think about when you're creating an incident, you probably want to have a number of days within which you'd like to have it completed or reviewed. So we've got a rule that returns an incident due date, and we have another rule one for the SLA, the number of days, and we have another one for who will approve it. So when we submit something, if I want Peter to approve it under a certain condition, we'll use a rule. And if we want to get the actual due date for the incident, we do a rule. And the reason we do that is we want to kind of simulate what would happen if you were pulling an event out of ECC or S4 where you might have a promised delivery date. And so that's going to be coming out, and then we want to have the workflow and or process visibility set on top of that, which is what you're going to see. So this is kind of the idea. So we had this workflow already built out. Now we've got some rules. So then the question was, okay, how can we now put something on top that would let us see how many incidents are out there by category? How many incidents are out there by priority? How long is it taking us to approve or deal with these incidents? So all those kinds of questions that you might want to answer if you're on the management side, how would we do that? So with that intro, Peter, I'm going to throw the ball into your court. You can take us through these 4 or 5 slides before we drop in and see some real software in action.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And I just want to call attention, there's some links that should be available that'll give you some background material on workflow management because process visibility is now part of workflow. We also have it as a standalone service, but we're seeing that the vast majority of customers that are doing extensions would leverage workflow rules and process visibility in unison. So,
Peter, if I've got my top right, just one second, I've highlighted those resources on their screen. I can't see their screen, but I'm assuming I just highlighted it. If someone can confirm that in the chat box, that'd be pretty cool, because I always press the button, but I never know what happens. Anyway, keep going, my friend.
All right, well, thank you. So I think we named this service, or now a capability, pretty aptly with process visibility. So we're talking about processes, so business processes, workflows, et cetera. And the challenge has always been, particularly in end-to-end, how do we get visibility into this? So imagine if you start a process in S4, it traverses some middleware and then ends up in Ariba, and you want to track this, say, purchase order. There's 3 different systems, and it's a little bit challenging. So you have a lot of flexibility in these processes, but the monitoring of the processes across different infrastructure becomes very challenging. So what we did is basically came out with a visibility service that basically is going to take the events from all these underlying systems and correlate them together and give you a visualization, which is pictured right here in the middle. So the key point here is what we're showing today is out-of-the-box support for SAP Cloud Platform Workflow, and that's the basis of the demo today. But I just want to say that this capability is also true for standalone systems, SAP LOB applications, whether they're on the cloud, on-premise, and it's also works for non-SAP systems. The real magic behind here is the business events need to come into process visibility, and it'll do its magic and visualize this scenario for you. So why do you need monitoring? Of course, you want to assess the overall health of a process. So we all know the goal is to reach the end of a process, but there's some other constraints. For instance, Scott alluded to, promised delivery date. So if you miss a promised delivery date, yeah, the process ended, but that's not so good. You could lose a customer over that. So the idea is if I had real-time visibility and I see that there's a chance I could miss a process delivery date, I can actually take the actions to correct this. And as we all know, it's easier to correct a problem when it happens rather than later. So that's sort of the motivation behind process visibility. And what are some of the capabilities? Well, the first one pictured here is the correlation. So the idea is if you have a process that's spanning, SAP, non-SAP, middleware, et cetera, how do I basically link all these process fragments together? And this is what we call correlation. This is typically going to be done something like on a business document number, like a sales order number, purchase order number, et cetera. The next capability is classifying the process status. So this is the idea is that when I go into the dashboard, I want to know, where do I want to focus my attention? So what processes need help or actions to take to get them back on track? So this is this process status. And configuring the process workspace, what we're going to see in a moment, This is all done through configuration, so no development is involved, and we're going to actually create a scenario from scratch. We can also identify the process bottlenecks, and if we know there's a delay in something upstream, it's going to affect everything downstream. So being able to identify the potential bottlenecks is important. The next one, it's actually indicated as planned, but it's actually available in the product today, which is perform actions. So imagine if you see, well, I have an order, it's going out to a very important customer, but we're going to miss the promised delivery date. Well, you can take actions based on this, and maybe an example would be, hey, I want to kick off a remediation workflow to basically request that we expedite the shipping or overnight it. So from the dashboard, we could basically request a workflow that would go to a manager or so that he or she could approve expedited handling so that we can ensure that we meet that promised delivery date. So any type of remediation things that occur from business events, we can actually hook into this dashboard as well. And a future initiative is basically using machine learning to actually predict process issues before a problem actually arises. So we're working on that, but it's not in the product as of yet.
So Peter, let's just drill into that. Just one of the things you had on your previous slide there, if you can go back.
Sure.
One of the things that's really interesting to me that we were talking about is this cross-system, being able to correlate processes. So just to kind of put another example out there, if I understand correctly, let's say we had the typical onboarding scenario. I've got something going into a finance system like S4, or I've got some purchasing stuff going on with Ariba, I've got something going on with SuccessFactors. I think what I heard you say was it's entirely possible with process visibility to correlate and be able to get visibility into a process like that spans across multiple systems. That's what I heard you say.
Yep, and that's correct. Yep, and this correlation is based on some unique identifiers, so we can link the process instances. So we can say, yeah, the new hire is Scott Dillon. He's in SuccessFactors, but we need to pay him, so we had to create a vendor master record for him. But these are all part of the onboarding, in addition to like getting equipment, etc. And the idea is by having this visibility, we can ensure that, hey, Scott, when you start working, everything's in order. So the idea is by using this visibility, we can safeguard it just to make sure you hit the ground running from day one.
Awesome. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Yep. Okay. So the next I want to basically talk about the architecture. So the first thing we can see is the process visibility is a capability or a service that's running on SAP Cloud Platform. And as we were just kind of talking about, we can interface with different systems. So on the on-premise side, in the case of S4 or ECC, you would use the Cloud Connector. And for the cloud applications, which are pictured here, so they're going to use the HTTP protocol to deliver the process events. So sales order created, goods receipt received, etc. These events are going to actually flow into process visibility. And process visibility, as we can see, we have an event acquisition and where the correlation's occurring. We have a real-time data mart. We have the dashboards and these process performance indicators, which are really going to assess the overall health. Like, for instance, you can measure the amount of times a process has been reworked. Obviously, if there's a lot of rework, that's a symptom that you might have a data quality issue or some other problems with your process, but rework tends to be expensive. And with the process visibility, we also deliver Fury applications. So the workspace is where you'll actually see the dashboard. This is what end users will be working with. Developers, or what I would call citizen developers, because no code is required, will actually configure the scenarios using the business scenario configurator. And then, of course, we have admin tools that basically show the events and how to monitor the actual scenario. So this is all there. What's also interesting is, process analytics, which is really process visibility as a subset, can be combined with data analytics. So we have the integration into SAP Analytics Cloud, And one of the links that Scott sent out actually describes how that can be done. And of course, data from other applications, not pictured here, can also flow into process visibility. So with this in mind, what are the usage scenarios? Well, the first one, which we're showing today, is visibility on SAP Cloud Platform workflows, and this is out of the box. So if you're running on Cloud Foundry, this works out of the box. If you're using Workflow on Neo, I would basically highly recommend that you switch to Cloud Foundry to take full advantage of this service. The other scenarios, as I said, you can basically work with a non-SAP system, so Microsoft Dynamics or whatever. The only thing is that you would need to basically be able to provision these events that I talk about and basically send them into the process visibility APIs. And from an SAP standpoint, we're basically providing, like, for instance, SuccessFactors with its intelligence services is already providing events out of the box, which can be leveraged by applications like process visibility. And one of the nice things that we're doing is part of live process content. And once again, you'll find that referenced in one of the links, is that we're actually delivering pre-delivered scenarios for SAP applications. So you'll see that as well. So this is a screenshot for your reference of what a typical dashboard would look like. And what I'd like to do at this point is share my screen, and we'll just basically see what's under the hood here. So just one moment.
Once again, everybody on the phone, if you've got questions, just throw them into the Q&A. I'll do my best to get them answered. I've answered 2 out of 3 already. Shreya, there's one little note on your question. I'm not sure about that one, but I'll talk with Peter towards the end or answer it later. Good job, Peter. So you're going to share your screen now?
I think I am sharing, am I not?
Yep, you are. Yep, I see it now.
Oh, okay. Good.
Good job.
All right. Okay, I'm just basically running 2 browsers. I think this will help us a little bit here as that one's coming up. Let me log on. Okay, so this is workflow management. We have business rules, we have workflow and process visibility, what we're focusing. And if you remember that architecture slide, I was talking about the process workspace. This is the dashboard. And I just want to bring this up alongside here. Let's get the dashboard up. So let me get the, let me just basically, I'll open this up in a new screen, or actually a new window, I think would be better. Okay, so these are our scenarios at the moment, and I just want to go into the garage, which is the one that I built with Scott, and we're going to rebuild for you in the latter part of the day. So what we can see here, and maybe let's go through an end user experience first. So one of the things you can do, here are some of the tiles, and the first thing that you see is open instances. So at the moment, these are workflows or processes that are in flight, so they're not completed. And the idea here is if you need to adjust something, you would look here. Typically, we're going to see processes that are on track, which means you don't need to do anything. At risk, this is the ones like, hey, we're going to miss a promised delivery date, so it needs your attention. Critical means it's overdue. And we'll talk about how this is done momentarily. Additionally, sometimes, seeing a bird's eye view of the open instances, we can also basically create phases. And phases are basically, if I scroll down here, we can basically see requests that we have 2 phases. So we have in the start and processing. So these 22 open instances would normally be distributed between the various phases, which are completely configurable. So what are phases? Well, if you ever did, like, for instance, project management, and someone asks you what the status is, you talk about milestones. Did we reach this milestone or whatever? It helps us better understand, and you don't get, oh, I'm on step 46 of 74 or something like that. So phases gives you a better view of where the things are and where the potential bottlenecks are. In addition to that, we have metrics on the completed instances, whether they completed without violations or with violations, or which ones were canceled. We get overview of cycle time, canceled instances, and you can also create things like, for instance, we want all the instances and we want a grouping by priority. So we elected to have a donut chart here. We can also see it by category, which is pictured here. And average approval times. So the main thing is what we can do with these events. We can always measure how many times something occurred. We can measure durations between the timestamps of events in order to give you a meaningful dashboard. So let's kind of basically, we can drill down from any one of these tiles to actually see the supporting data. And here we get a table view, which we can see. And of course, what you could do is basically, filter on anything. So for instance, if I was at a call center and someone said to me, hey, what's the status of my incident? I reported a flat tire. I could basically search on something like tire, and it's going to basically say, yeah, I found your incident, Mr. Jones, or whatever the case may be. So that's a pretty cool capability. But we can also drill down into any one of these instances to get more insight. So I'm just going to click this first one. And here we basically get some information. Obviously, it's open. It's critical. Why is it critical? Because our target time was 7 minutes, and this has actually been running for almost a day, which we see here. And of course, you can see when it was started and what the actual target date is. So we see information here. All of this is, once again, configurable. I can click on the phases, and here are the 2 phases that we defined and the business events that occurred. You can see information about here as well. We're currently on this step and when this was reached. The other nice thing is I can actually get a visualization of this, and I can see, what the events are. Now imagine if there was rework. You would actually see kind of a looping mechanism as well. So, and if you preferred, we could actually see this in a tabular view as well. So this is some of the features that we can do with this. And I just want to kind of go back to show you how we can build one of this. So let me just
Peter,
pick this up for reference.
Yeah, can you just refresh that page that you're on?
Sure.
And I want to say 2 things while you're refreshing that. So you might see now that the chart has changed. So in the background, while Peter was explaining to you basically how that works, I went ahead in the background and I created 10, 12 more incidents that were created in behind the scenes. And then now all of a sudden he's refreshed his screen. And if you were really paying attention, you might have noticed that most of the incidents were in the critical state. And now we've got some that are on track. So that's number 1. Number 2, for those of you that are keenly aware of what we're doing in the Fiori space and the Fiori overview page and things like that, you might notice some similarities to that on the first dashboard page, because it is in fact a Fiori overview page. So SAP itself is using other SAP components to fast track the delivery of our solutions, number 1. But a part of the Fiori overview page, Peter, on the top, can you illustrate the search and just do a search by, I don't know, do a search for phone or something?
Yeah, I actually did it with Tire earlier, but sure, I just did SAP.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Perfect. And so you can see here that one of the things that comes with the Fiori overview page is the ability to search against things that are defined in the bottom detail section. So this comes along for the ride, and you'll see when I go to build one, all this just comes along. So as a business user, I don't have to know how to build an overview page. The product is going to generate one for me, which I think is pretty awesome. Anyway, back to you, Peter. Sorry.
Yep, thank you. So let's take a look how we can build this. So let me just minimize this. So once again, this was the process workspace, and one of the other kind of cool Fury things that Scott was mentioned, what I'd like to do is we can just move around these tiles as we see fit. So yeah, but anyway, so we basically, this is the process workspace, so just this linkage here. The event acquisition, this is basically where you can see all the events. So imagine if I was getting events from Ariba, I could go into here, and time permitting, we'll show this towards the end. This is these two tiles are more for administrators, but for the citizen developer, this no-code approach, we would go into this configure visibility scenario, which I'm going to do right now. And yeah, so these are the scenarios that we have at the moment. And what I'm going to do is just go into this garage process visibility scenario. And the first thing you can see here is this is the workflow incident assignment that Scott's been working with as part of the garage series. So we already have this brought in. And what you can see is out of the box, and you'll see this when Scott does it live, is it automatically populates the events that are coming from the workflow. So for instance, the start event, the end events, any intermediate timers or messaging in the UIs when it was created. So this new safety ends created and completed is a UI, so we can see that information. What doesn't come in are service tasks and scripts. The reason being is they execute pretty much instantaneously, so there's really no point in really getting visibility into that execution. In addition to the events coming in, we also have the process context. So this is the data that's being used in the workflow. So the idea is when you create a workflow instance, or as Scott will have you guys doing later, you're going to basically put in a priority, a category, you know, a title. Incident due date is going to be calculated as part of the workflow. Scott alluded to this by use of a business rule. But the idea here is if we want to add other processes, so an observed process would be a non-workflow in this case. So SAP, non-SAP applications. We also see this is a new features where we can bring in sentiment analysis to complement this. So for instance, if you wanted feedback, we talked about the onboarding. We could actually have that as part of it where people can give, you know, hey, yeah, no, this is, you know, inefficient, or this is working very smoothly. We could bring in this information. This add process template is part of the workflow management. It's a little bit more advanced at this point, but it's be a great future garage session if you guys are interested. So that's actually the workflow. And if you ever make changes to workflow, it's very easy to re-import it in. You won't lose your work. And what you can actually do is also rename any of these things if you didn't like the name to make it more meaningful. And the next area is correlation. Well, workflow is pretty much, we're just using workflow, so we're not correlating this with any other process fragments that are running elsewhere. But if you were, you would basically need to set up a correlation key. And as I said, you know, a business document number is typically what's used. Next, we have phases. And what I want to kind of do is basically show you the phases here. So let me just reacquaint myself.
So just while you're doing that, Peter, one of the things that was interesting to me yesterday when we were talking, so in our case, as an example, I built out the workflow. So I went into the SCP Cloud Platform Workflow Service, and I went in, configured it, built the workflow, and it's running on top of Cloud Platform as a, you know, and that required a little bit of technical knowledge in terms of building that out. But once the workflow was running, then you have a scenario here where a business user could go in and basically say, hey, which workflows are running, and import that in, right? It doesn't take much to do that. So they can see what's running, grab it, import it, and then start working with it. Is that accurate?
Yes, exactly. Yep. Yep. Exactly right, Scott. So here are the phases that we're talking about. So we have a start and a processing. So I basically want to, and remember, this is just basically breaking, a process down into manageable chunks. So you want to kind of see what area is it in, So what do we do here in order to basically see these phases? Let me make this full screen. We basically say, well, to create a new phase, and just as an example, this could be test. And click OK. And what I would do is choose one or more start events. So what marks the start of the phase? So I can say, yeah. And we choose the end event. So you can have multiple start and end events. But once again, this is just basically telling you where in the process it is. So you're breaking the project or the process down into meaningful chunks. So let me just delete this so I don't mess anything up.
So just as you're going through that, Peter, so the example that you used at the beginning of this session, so let's say you had a complicated workflow, something like an order to cash. And so in an order to cash, in terms of doing, your phases, it could be quote created, right? So that could be a phase. And then the person that's building the process visibility scenario could map that out depending on what they want to focus in on as part of the process they want to watch, right? It's up to them to define that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like typically in order to cash, I would have an invoicing phase, those kind of things where you can track, because typically, you have different departments involved in different phases, and departmental work is a natural way to sort of segment the process into these various phases. So, yeah.
Right. So when you were clicking on start events, those events, just for everyone on the phone, those events are going to be imported based on the workflow that we define. So I define the workflow, maybe identity is highly based on what came in, which is why Peter made the point, hey, if you want to rename some of those, that was just him taking a little shot at me. Maybe I didn't name them great. Maybe we could rename that to be something a little bit nicer from the business side, which is totally possible, and the tool provides that. So this is all good. Keep going, Peter. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, and just another thing, like we were talking about order to cash, a start event could be the quote was created, but not all sales orders have a quotation. So you can either have two start events, either a quote was created or the sales order was created to basically initiate the start here. So yeah, good point. Then the next thing I want to talk about is the state. So basically we have open, which basically are processes that are in flight. And then you can basically earmark which ones are completed. So typically this is going to be the end events, which you see here. And you can just basically put multiple end events, etc. So let me And abruptly ended just means that, it was canceled. So it could be canceled by an administrator, or basically imagine if it was a new hire process and the person declined the offer or something like that, then this would be indication of an abrupt end. And you would basically have the events that correspond to that. And based on that, you're going to see the various tiles like we're showing here. You can see the different statuses. Let me get to this one. I have to put it in full screen. Like canceled instances, failed, etc. So that would be reflected in that tile as well. So yeah. So the next thing is the status. And the status, and this is a very powerful concept. In fact, I think Scott in particularly really liked it because what this basically means is that if I go back to our dashboard here, I'm sorry, wrong one. What we basically have, oops, where'd it go? This is the tile I'm referring to. So we have critical, at risk, and on track. Now you may be asking yourself, well, how does it know? And this is exactly what we're talking about in this scenario. We basically have the choice of a constant. A constant is going to be, yeah, this workflow needs to be completed in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever you want. But a really more powerful one is to basically use an attribute. Now, an attribute is really going to come from the process context. So if I basically toggle over here, you can see the various context attributes. We have creation date. We also have incident due date here, the very bottom. You see it's a timestamp. And when I go back over into the status here, I get a drop down of any timestamp fields I can work with, date or timestamp. And basically this, I'm sorry, I wanted to incident due date. And then what we can do is then set a threshold. So the threshold is currently set for 80%, which basically means that the process, imagine if this due date was 10 days in the future, that on the 8th day, it would move from on track into at risk for the 9th and 10th day. And after the 10th day, it would actually be in the critical phase. So that's basically what we're showing here. And the idea behind this is that if you're responsible for this process, you want to focus on those process instances that are at risk. So that's what's being done here. Critical means it's already late or overdue. And I just want to kind of pick up a little bit on the timing to give
Scott 2 minutes.
Yeah, so we have the various attributes, and the attributes come in here, and we can create our own attributes. Like, for instance, here's an approval time, and we want to measure the duration between events. This is really powerful because you can also do things like event A and not B. So I have the invoice, but not the goods receipt. So all of these things you can do with this. Action, well, let's go to the performance indicators because this is exactly what you're going to see. And in the interest of time, we're going to be creating a few of these, or Scott's going to be doing that, so I won't do that. And I'm just going to end on actions. Now, what are actions? Actions are basically these remediations. So what do I do in the case of there's a problem? Well, I can actually create a new action here. Just being kind of lazy with my naming here, but what you can basically say a navigational, which basically is going to go into the system of record, or we can trigger a workflow, and you can basically just need to set the destination, the workflow definition, and this is the context that you're going to send to, or the parameters that you'll send to initiate this workflow. And these fields, this JSON name value pairs, will be the attributes, and you can parameterize them. That's part of our context. So yeah, so if I went here back to, and let's kind of drill down onto some of the new ones.
1 minute.
Yeah, what I can do is pass in these fields here. So these are the attributes. And of course, for a given instance, if I looked at this, the actions, if I did create one, it would actually be showing here, and I just click the button, and this would cause a flip over to the remediation. All right, I'm going to be true to my time, Scott, and I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and let's get to work.
Yeah, that's and normally I would be pretty panicked about having to do a live build, Peter, but based on what I've seen over the past 2 weeks, I'm not too worried. So we've got 14 minutes to build a process visibility dashboard. I'm going to share my screen, and because yes, we've walked you through now basically what the tool includes in terms of feature function, but what I'd like to do is be able to give you some insight into what that looks like if you were to do it yourself. So let me scroll down here and let me go over to here. So I'm going to bring up the exact same dashboard that Peter had, but first what I want to do is kind of just compare and contrast. So for those people that joined the garage session last month, I built out something similar because I did want to show, compare and contrast what can be built with our tools, UI5, Fiori, integration cards, and I did that, and it looks pretty nice, and there's some other things that we could add to this to make it look even better, but it's a dashboard that gives us similar information, but the skill set required to do it is that of a programmer. So that's for sure, number one. Number two, I just want to show people what we're about to import. So some people were asking in the Q&A, can I use this in conjunction with Workflow? Absolutely, and that's exactly what we're about to show. So this is the workflow scenario that we built out back in March with DJ Adams. we walk through. There's a garage session on that. You can go watch it. The only difference is that what we did for this session is that we created 2 business rules, and you can see them here. Use business rules for completion time, and I think using the business rules for the approver. So that's there. So in general, though, one last step that we had to do. So if you click on the white space of the workflow, there's a little tab here called attributes. And here we can list elements, some or all, of the pieces of information that we have as part of the workflow in the context. So this is important because Peter showed you these on the screen, but until I actually import them, you won't see them. So here you see them defined. So just take note: incident title, due date, created at, incident priority. So there's like 6 fields that are listed here. And the last thing that I will show you is that, so that's the workflow piece, and then the business rules that we used. I'm just going to show you one. So as an example, we have one here called incident SLAs as an example. And then underneath the rule, you can see here determine due date. And what it returns back, just so you'll see how it's used in the process visibility, it returns an incident due date. So in other words, we're creating an incident, go review this broken telephone. When do we want to have it completed by? So having said that, Peter, we've got not much time to build out a brand new scenario, like 12 minutes. So let's see how we can do here. So I'm just going to start with the configure visibility scenario screen. And there's a plus here. So I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm guessing we're going to start with the plus. Yep. Garage 2020. No description. I'm lazy. So we've got that created. So now what, my friend? What do I do from here?
Just go into it, and now the first thing, click on that blue plus to import your workflow.
Okay. So here's the workflow here.
And incident assignment.
What are the?
Oh, these are all the workflow definitions that are available that you can choose from. So you would just pick, like, for instance, incident assignment as the workflow that you want to use. And now what we see are all the events based on, the workflow palette that you had shown, and the context which you had shown that were set in the workflow properties.
Right. So if I just whisk there for 30 seconds, I can see incident title, due date, created at. And then if I go back to here, title, incident due date, created at. So it's basically automatically, because of the connection between process visibility and SAP Cloud Platform Workflow, it's going to see whatever I've defined in that context as an attribute.
Yeah, and Scott, what I would just basically, if you would change the data type for the incident due date and the creation date to timestamp.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, that's just a little limitation of workflow that we're addressing.
Okay, got these.
Okay, perfect. And of course, we could rename these things, but we don't need to. So just do a save here at this point, Okay, and now let's go and create a phase or phases. So if you click on phases and just hit the blue plus again.
All right.
All right, and we'll just start or beginning or first phase, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, start phase 1. Got it.
Okay, and then just okay. All right, and now pick the start event or the drop down for the start event. So so why don't we say the start event of the workflow? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and for the end event, that's good. We just need one. Yeah, and now for the end event, we can see when the new safety incident is created or completed, whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is important if I just go back here for a second, because in this workflow, what people have not seen, see this new safety incident? That's the event that we're picking. So basically what we're saying is from the time something goes from here to here, let's track it. Now, in this particular case, it's a custom workflow, and the names I know are not great, but you basically have control over what you would be providing visibility into, a sub portion of this entire workflow, essentially. Okay, so going back. Okay, perfect. So we've got this created. Now I can do a save here, I guess.
Yeah, let's create one more phase, and then we'll move off this.
Okay.
And you can just call it end or I'm not very creative with my naming at the moment.
We were going to do not approved or something like that, right?
This is the after the event. So, okay, click OK. Yeah, that's fine. You can call it whatever you want.
All right.
All right. And then what you can, from the drop down, we can say, well, now the safety incident is completed. Yeah. The third one. No, we ended the first one on created, so we're going to pick this one up at completed. It's a general idea not to have the phases overlap. And I would just basically say for the end event, we can actually pick the last two. Now, you're still in the start event, so you're fine here. Yep. Now, the end event, just pick the last two, which basically is saying either the flow event completed or it was abruptly ended. So we're good to go here. So just do a save. Okay, and now let's go right to the status. Yeah, and pick the target time. Once again, the drop down, we're going to pick an attribute. Yeah.
So what's the difference in these two? You got an attribute and you have a constant.
A constant is going to be, as the name implies, 2 days, 2 hours, or whatever. Where an attribute is coming from the workflow, like a promised delivery date, and we're going to use the incident due date.
Right, gotcha.
Okay. Now, if you're really risk averse, you can lower this percentage from 80 to 50. So this is a preference. So the idea is, when do you want to know about when something goes from on track to at risk? And that's what this percentage is actually doing. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, what I would say is we can actually create a performance indicator. Right on the last tab, if you saved, yeah.
I have not, but I'll do it now just to be sure, yep.
Okay, and why don't we basically create a tile incidents by category?
Okay, I'll do that. And just one quick note here. So what people are seeing and what was very impressive to me is that I didn't create any of this, but this kind of comes out of the box, right? So when you attach the workflow that's been deployed and you import it into process visibility, I get these quote unquote tiles, dashboard cards, overview cards by default. And now I'm going to basically add another one. Right?
So, yeah, exactly. So we can call it incidents. And subtitle, yeah, by category. Okay. Click OK.
Cool. Now what?
Okay. Now for the representation, yeah, you can leave the description alone. Yeah, the drop down. So we have a couple ways that we want to picture this. So you can choose, donut chart, bar chart, whatever you. But let's go with a bar chart.
Okay.
And okay. Yeah. And we'll stick with instance. So this is per instance. And now for the measure, select the drop down and you want to go number of instances. Yeah.
Okay.
And now the dimension. So this is the data or the attribute you want to work with. So we can say category or incident category, I'm sorry. And we can optionally add filters if we wanted to, but we won't do this here. We can save this.
Okay.
And how are we on time, Scott? We can either, I'm sorry?
We got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. It's up to you. Do you want to create another one? We could do like pending approvals or.
One more.
Okay. Well, actually, for this one, we need to create an attribute first. Okay.
Okay. Go back here.
So just click on attributes. Yeah. So we want to create pending approvals as the name.
Oops.
Okay, and now we're going to pick from the drop-down, not duration between events, but we want to say pending approval means the safety incident was created but not completed. So what you basically want to do, so event A and not event B, perfect. Yep, select that. Now pick event A, so safety instance created, but event B hasn't occurred, which is completed, which by definition means, yeah, safety instance Now, safety instance, not flow, but safety new safety instance completed. Yeah. So what this is saying, Scott, is it was created but not yet completed. Okay, save this.
Okay.
Okay, and now last one is we'll create a performance indicator. Okay, and just click the blue plus. Yeah. And yeah, we can call it pending approvals. And we'll say subtitle is high. So we only want to look at the high approvals here. Yep. Cool.
Okay.
So click OK.
All right.
Okay, and we'll stick with a header, and we'll stick now from the data, the measure, a little further down now. Yep. Okay, now pick the pending approvals, which we just created. Perfect. And now let's add a filter. So hit the blue plus. And now the attribute is going to be incident priority. So in the list, yep. And we're going to say equal to high in lowercase. Yep. So click OK. And let's save and activate.
All right. Good to go so far.
Yeah, now let's kind of navigate and let's look at our process workspace and see what we created.
Do we have to import the data?
Well, yeah, certainly. Yeah, let's do that. So click on the monitor. Yep. And you should see, yep. So what you want to do is process the data. So at the very bottom, you'll see process data. So normally, excuse me, Scott, this is on a scheduled 5 minutes. So what we want to do is, did you create some incidents yet?
I did not, but I could create more. But I guess we just pulled in the ones that are already out there, 338.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. So that looks good. So now let's look at our dashboard.
All right, so let's go in here. Surely, Peter, it cannot be that easy. But here's the scenario that we just created. Let's click on it. Because it certainly didn't take me 15 minutes to build out the dashboard for the last garage session.
There you go. So you see the incidents by category, which we just created, 27 pending approvals. We have the cycle time out of the box. We have the phases, and you can see the attributes. Now, if you were to run your utility to create more instances, we can see, but you can drill down. If you click on the 46, it's fully functional at this point. So good job, Scott.
That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing for me because of the time that it took. Like, it literally took us 14 minutes to build out this dashboard that's fully searchable, allows you to drill in and see the details. You've got complete control over what you end up putting into the dashboard itself. You can pick and choose your items. Now, we've only got 1 minute left. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because there's a couple of questions there. It's just one of the questions was, is this a replacement, Peter, for OPI? And I know you've got some background with OPI, so I just thought I'd throw that one at you.
Yeah, so operational process intelligence, I mean, they have the same goal in mind, but the architectures are completely different. Operational process intelligence was a HANA-based product. Process visibility is running natively in SAP Cloud Platform. Same goals in mind, but I think, lessons learned from OpInt with process visibility. I find personally process visibility is much easier to work with. And a lot of the complexity in OpInt is sort of shielded away. Yeah.
Well, okay. So one last question, then we're going to call it a day because we're right at the top of the hour. So a lot of people are asking, in terms of Cloud Platform, where does this sit? So you had mentioned to me yesterday or the day before that process visibility has become part of a bundle, right? It's not something that you buy process visibility on its own. It's included with something else. Is that accurate?
Somewhat. I mean, what we basically did is for any existing workflow customer, as of June 9th, we included this. Same price, same everything. The only requirement here is that you need to be on Cloud Foundry to use this. Yeah, it's included in there. We still have it as a standalone service under CPA, but the idea is why, you should just go with workflow. or workflow
Gotcha.
management to be more exact.
That's awesome. Okay, everybody. Want to say thank you very much for attending today. We had a couple of other things in terms of showing you the creation of incidents real time and bringing them in. We just ran out of time. So we always ask people, if you want to schedule a follow-on meeting with myself or Peter to get into more detail, we don't chase you per se. We just give you the option so you can answer the survey. But thank you for coming out. Mr. McNulty, thank you very much. And Peter will be back with me in October. We're going to drill into the business rules. And at the end of August, we will drill into robotic process automation for those of you that are interested in taking a look at that. But another great day in the garage, Peter. Thank you very much. And thanks for coming out.
Yeah, and thanks, everybody. Yep, all the best. Bye-bye.